Hello and welcome to episode 310 of Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. Joining me today, my very special guest, author, anti-racist, speaker, Tim Wise joins me. Also, mom and dad stop by to talk about our Governor Andrew Cuomo, and of course, a great news recap. My name is Pete Dominic. Time to stand up with me right now. Stand up. Hello and happy Monday if you're listening on Monday. Thank you very much for checking me out today and every day, because it's every day of the week. You can download a new episode of Stand Up Pete Dominic Daily. Joining me today, the great Tim Wise. I was driving all day today. Well, it's about 4 hours from where I grew up to where I now am raising my kids. Had a great time with my parents over the weekend. We went skiing on Saturday with my dad, who also took Ava out, teaching her to drive, and they went shopping with my mom. Both my parents are vaccinated. We even went out to dinner for the first time in forever on Friday night, and it was just fantastic. Thank you for all of you who have been following along with how I have been doing with my mom and dad, and I am so thankful to hear from so many of you and hear how you are all doing as well. Really nice to hear from Ben and Charlotte, longtime listener, who wrote, "I just want to let you know I've been quietly listening to the pod, and it's getting really, really good. As I knew you would, you found your rhythm, and the show is great. You're a great broadcaster. I admire your ability to find the important issues and conversations. I am proud to be a Patreon subscriber. It is the only podcast I pay for. Keep it up, brother. Love to the family." Ben in Charlotte, love to you. Thank you very much, man. That email made me feel real good, and I greatly appreciate it. Got a great week of shows coming, and if you'd like to sign up for a paid subscription like Ben and over 800 others, please do right now. Come on. Use that check you got over the weekend from the government. Put a few bucks towards a subscription to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, or maybe add a few bucks to your current subscription. And join us on Thursday night for the Stand Up Hangout. I hated missing it this past weekend. And hang out with us anytime on the Discord platform, where there's always someone to chat and network with and talk with. And you're never alone if you're a stand-up subscriber. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or just go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. Okay. At the top of every show, I give you a recap of the day before. In this case, on Monday, I give you a recap of kind of the weekend news, which I guess kicks off on, if you want to say it, was it Thursday night that Joe Biden addressed the nation and said that it looks like by July 4th, we're going to be able to hang out together, maskless and naked in our backyards? Okay, he didn't say anything about naked, but if you guys want to come over, we're going to have a nude barbecue. Okay, we're not going to do that because I would never do that, because that alone made me uncomfortable just to think about it. But here's Joe Biden telling us we have to work together, and starting with him needing you. Uncle Joe sounding like Uncle Sam.
I need you. I need every American to do their part. And that's not hyperbole. I need you. I need you to get vaccinated when it's your turn and when you can find an opportunity. And to help your family, your friends, your neighbors get vaccinated as well. Because here's the point. If we do all this, if we do our part, if we do this together, by July the 4th, there's a good chance you, your families and friends will be able to get together in your backyard or in your neighborhood and have a cookout or a barbecue and celebrate Independence Day. That doesn't mean large events with lots of people together, but it does mean small groups will be able to get together. After this long, hard year, that will make this Independence Day something truly special, where we not only mark our independence as a nation, but we begin to mark our independence from this virus.
Yeah.
But to get there, we can't let our guard down. This fight is far from over. As I told the woman in Pennsylvania, I'll tell you the truth. On July 4th, with your loved ones, is the goal. But a lot can happen.
And Trump, longtime Trump, I don't know, hack supporter, cable news. Was he in the administration? Doesn't matter. Steve Cortez, he tweeted, Joe Biden says if we're good boys and girls, that we can just maybe have a small little 4th of July barbecue. I didn't ask for your permission, Sleepy. That's what he tweeted around the clip I just played for you. So he doesn't need your permission. It's, of course, never been the point. It's just always been about working together, looking out for each other, something that Steve Cortez and I think a lot of other Americans don't think about. If they don't know you personally, they're not that worried about you. You're a stranger, and to hell with you. That's really the American way for a frighteningly large percentage of Americans. But not all of us, and not us, not here at the stand-up community. Good people looking out for each other all the time. Most people, in fact, I actually think are good. But these nut jobs that are still supporting Donald Trump or ever supported him, you got to question where their values are. They certainly aren't the type of Christians that most of us thought were Christian. Were they ever really, though? I was talking about that with my parents this weekend, too. Okay, so the most important, I'll come back to COVID-related news later on, but the most important issue in America right now, of course, seems to be democracy, right? Voting, access to voting, voting suppression, and everything that Republicans are doing right now to try to make voting harder for people who are likely to vote Democrats, especially black people. We're going to continue to have to talk about the fact that Republicans are trying to roll back progress. Republican legislatures across the country are proposing the greatest reduction in voting access since the late 19th century. You're seeing all kinds of great reporting and investigative journalism about this. And it's all convincing Republicans to think that the most important issue, and they're asked in one poll at least, what it was, voting security, because they believe the big lie and that the election was stolen. Republicans have proposed more than 250 laws in 45 states to limit mail-in early in-person voting, even on election day voting. The bills, according to Meet the Press, would amount to the greatest effort to reduce ballot access since the Jim Crow era. And this is so important. And it's great that media is covering it. It's great that Democrats are trying to pass legislation that would restore the Voting Rights Act. It was gutted by a Republican conservative Supreme Court during the Obama administration led by Justice Roberts. But you can't both sides this. And that is the main criticism of Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, that he's always playing both sides, especially to issues that there is only one side to. He sets it up well here, but this is a segment. This is, I think, an exercise in media literacy or media criticism. Listen to how he both sides this argument when he knows that there's only one side to it. Here it is. Listen to the top. He sets it up. And then he comes in for his both sides landing.
We're going to take a special look this morning at the fight underway over our democracy. Republicans have proposed more than 250 laws in 45 states designed to limit mail-in early in-person voting and even election day voting. And Republicans may have the power to achieve these goals. They hold legislative majorities and the governorships, as you can see here, in 24 states. And they have proposed some restrictive election laws in 22 of them. The bills would likely have the effect of curtailing the early vote methods used primarily this past election by Democratic voters and shift more voting to Election Day when recently Republican voters have dominated. All told, the bills amount to the greatest effort to reduce ballot access, particularly for African Americans, since the Jim Crow era. Among the states considering the changes, 5 that Joe Biden turned blue last year: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia. All have Republican legislatures, by the way. And the 3 large states he lost by less than 5 points: Texas, North Carolina, and Florida, also Republican legislatures in theirs. Republicans insist they're just trying to eliminate voter fraud, inspired in part by former President Trump's false claims that somehow this last election was stolen. Democrats say it is all a cover for an effort to elect Republicans by limiting Democratic voters' access to the polls.
And did you hear it? Republicans insist, and then he says, and Democrats say, right? And then it's his job to explain it and point to all of the data and make all of the factual arguments for which there are only one side to. But I did get a kick out of hearing the liquid gurgling in the back of his throat when he said the word 5. Here it is.
5.
Yeah, let's listen to it one more time. Listen to that phlegm gurgle in the back.
5.
Sorry. Anyway, listen, it's It just happens all the time, and we need to be able to have a moral clarity and a more objective form of journalism. There has not been voter fraud that has affected the outcome of any election in the last 50 years. Now, they do go on to play clips from both sides as well, Democrats and Republicans, again, making it seem like there are two sides to this story. I'm not going to do it because the Republicans are lying. But here are two of the Democrats from the Georgia state legislature. Here is state senator from Georgia, Lester Jackson.
It smells like Jim Crow laws in the past. This smells like poll taxing. It smells like voter suppression.
Here's State Senator Gloria Butler, also of Georgia, with a little historical perspective on this.
People died. People were blooded. People marched and fought for the right to vote. And this just takes us backwards.
Overall, it was a pretty well done segment. I just hated that there was this kind of balance. I mean, Chuck Todd had the best guest on this issue, Stacey Abrams, which I thought was great. So give him credit for that, the show. And Chuck Todd asked Stacey Abrams if she thought that the Senate should get rid of the filibuster so they can pass the House bill, H.R. 1, which would just restore the voting rights to all these states that it's being taken from. Here's what she said.
I think the focus should be on protecting our democracy. We know that January 6th was the opening salvo in an attempt to roll us back to Jim Crow era. We are watching 7 times the number of bills permeating across state legislatures than occurred in 2020 during election year. And we know that the U.S. Senate, much like the U.S. House, has the sole responsibility under the Elections Clause of the U.S. Constitution to regulate the time, place, and manner of elections. That is something that we have to accomplish. It would be best if it was done in concert with Republicans, as we have in times past when we had to confront our demons and do better by our people. And my deep hope is that we can get it done. But I would say that an exemption to the filibuster for the purposes of protecting our democracy is not only logical, it is fundamental to who we are.
All right, Stacey Abrams, definitely follow that story, the story about voting rights being rolled back and voting rights being restored, and do whatever you can to get involved and tell me what we can do to get involved. I'll be reaching out to some congressmen this week and trying to get them on the podcast to talk about what H.R. 1 is and why it's needed. All right, Dr. Anthony Fauci was also on Meet the Press, and Chuck Todd asked Fauci why he thinks there's vaccine hesitancy from Trump supporters, specifically, especially men.
I want to talk about vaccine hesitancy here because we're noticing something, at least in polling, that it is not the conventional wisdom about vaccine hesitancy that you see this divide by race. We're seeing a bigger divide by politics. We talked about it earlier. For instance, among Trump voters, 47% have said that they will not be vaccinated. 30% say yes. Among Biden voters, 58-10. Among Republican men, half of Republican men say they're not going to take this vaccine. You have the PSA with all the former presidents except one, President Trump, in there. Do you think he needs to be enlisted here at all to get his voters to take this vaccine?
Chuck, I hope he does, because the numbers that you gave are so disturbing, how such a large proportion of a certain group of people would not want to get vaccinated merely because of political consideration. It makes absolutely no sense. And I've been saying that for so long. We've got to dissociate political persuasion from what's common sense, no-brainer public health things. The history of vaccinology has rescued us from smallpox, from polio, from measles, from all of the other diseases. What is the problem here? This is a vaccine that is going to be life-saving for millions of people. How some groups would not want to do it for reasons that I just don't understand. I mean, I just can't comprehend what the reason for that is when you have a vaccine that's 94 to 95% effective, right, and it is very safe. I just don't get it.
All right, he says, I don't get it. I can't comprehend it. I don't understand it. That's why he shouldn't be asked a political question necessarily. I mean, would it be important for Donald Trump to show himself getting the vaccine and endorse getting the vaccine over and over and over? Sure, it would be. Of course it would be. But he got the vaccine, and so did his wife, and they hid it from everybody. They hid themselves getting it. Nobody knew that they got it, like a pocket pardon, but a pocket vaccine. And the answer to why they are doing this is it's a wedge. That's why, Dr. Fauci. He doesn't know that because he hasn't probably followed politics that closely because he's been spending his entire life and career fighting epidemics and viruses in the worst parts of the world. That's why he's such a hero. But what the answer to the question is, it's a wedge. You find a wedge, something you can use to divide people. And that's what Donald Trump has always done. That's what they do on cable news. That's what they do everywhere. Find a wedge, divide people. That's what this is about. Of course, the vaccine, the mask, it's a wedge. It's divisive. They use it. It's reprehensible. It's immoral, and it should never be done. But of course, when you have zero principles and you only care about winning, finding and using a wedge is a pretty good idea. All right, enough ranting from me. Let's go back to the Sunday shows where on CBS's Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan had Dr. Scott Gottlieb joining her, and she asked him about what we're seeing in Europe now with new outbreaks, and we usually follow whatever happens there first, from fashion trends to viral outbreaks.
You've been saying watch Europe as an indicator of what may be happening here. Europe's moving pretty slow on their vaccinations. Italy is looking at a lockdown over Easter because of what they're seeing. Should we anticipate that's what's going to happen here?
Yeah, through this whole pandemic, we've been about maybe 3-4 weeks behind Europe. So we've used Europe as a barometer to what's going to happen in the United States. I think the tables have turned, and I think we're ahead of Europe because we're vaccinating so much more aggressively. Eastern Europe looks very bad right now. Italy looks bad. But I think the U.S. is in a much different situation through a combination of the fact that we have a lot of prior infections, so there's immunity in the population from prior infection. And we've now vaccinated 25% of adults. We're vaccinating probably about 1.5 to 2 million new people a day. We've vaccinated about 65% of those above the age of 65, about 75%, almost 75% this week of those above the age of 75. And we're seeing the benefits of that. A 96% reduction in nursing homes where we've had very good penetration with the vaccine. So I think we're in a different situation than Europe because of the vaccine-induced immunity that we're getting into the population.
Oh, well, that actually sounds pretty good. That's good news. All right, let's get off of COVID-19 and talk about something else healthcare related, women's healthcare related. You may or may not have heard that the state of Arkansas just passed sweeping new legislation, the toughest legislation in the country on abortion laws. My friend Ali Velshi, I'm scheduled to join this week. He's scheduled to join me, I should say, on this podcast this week. He had the head of the ACLU in Arkansas, woman named Megan Burrows, on his show. She's a staff attorney, I should say, Arkansas ACLU. Here she is.
That's exactly right, Ali. As you indicated, as the state legislators who have sponsored this bill and pushed this bill have indicated, as the governor has indicated in signing it, this law is clearly unconstitutional under nearly 5 decades of binding Supreme Court precedent. But these state anti-abortion politicians are attempting to use it as a vehicle to bring the case up to the Supreme Court and give the court an opportunity to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, 14 plus bills in state legislatures have proposed extreme abortion bans so far this year. And that is the lead counsel from the ACLU, Meg Burr, on Velshi. Also on Velshi, former federal prosecutor Joyce Vance talking about how much trouble Donald Trump may be in with the Manhattan DA. Apparently his former attorney, Michael Cohen, has been called in like 7 different times. Of course, Cy Vance has Trump's taxes, and there's rumors there could be indictments coming down this week. Here's Joyce Vance talking to Ali Velshi about it.
Michael Cohen can explain a lot of the documentary evidence that the Manhattan DA now has in hand. He may have been around for a lot of the transactions. He may be looking at papers underlying the taxes and able to tell them who's in the room. He can really help guide them to the best witnesses and the best evidence and help them understand transactions that may have involved criminal conduct. So no, the fact that he's been there 7 and is now rumored to be going back for an 8th time is not good news for Trump.
All right. There is a couple rando clips. Always love that show, Velshi, on Msnbc. You can watch it on demand. You can listen to it on a podcast. And he's going to join me this week, Ali Velshi, really good friend of mine and one of the best on television news. A real journalist, too. Love the guy. And also want to give you one final chunk here. And a big chunk it is, I guess, because I talked with my parents about it. But the governor of New York, our governor, my governor, is still in office, even though several women have accused him of different types of sexual harassment, inappropriate touching. And, of course, there are allegations that he cooked the books on people in nursing homes and didn't count hundreds of people's deaths and wasn't as transparent as everybody acted like he was being about nursing homes. And Mayor de Blasio has some ideas as to why. The mayor of New York was on CBS's Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, who asked Mayor Bill de Blasio point blank about that scandal.
Do you believe that he and his administration deliberately tried to cover up the scale of nursing home deaths?
I don't have a doubt in my mind. Everything was about his public image. Everything was about his political future. It was not about what people needed. And by the way, it was about campaign contributions. The nursing home industry, the big hospital systems, they gave him millions and millions of dollars. And he went easy on them. And he tried to cover up for everyone, not just him, but his donors. And I think the investigations are going to prove this, Margaret. This was a thoroughly corrupt situation. And he just needs to resign so we can actually turn the page. Mm-hmm. And look, it's an optimistic time, as you started out this morning. It's an optimistic time. We got to put the past behind us. Well, and Andrew Cuomo can't lead us into the future. Well, we've got the people of the state ready to reopen, but we need to get him out of the way to do it.
I want to know.
And Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who are the two senators, my senators here in New York, represent New York in the U.S. Senate. They called on Governor Andrew Cuomo to resign on Friday as he faces multiple sexual harassment allegations and, of course, that scandal stemming from his handling of the COVID-19 crisis. They said in a statement, due to the multiple credible sexual harassment and misconduct allegations, it's clear that Governor Cuomo has lost the confidence of his governing partners and the people of New York. They said this in a joint statement. And now here is Senator Chuck Schumer on MSNBC with Jonathan Capehart over the weekend.
Well, here's the bottom line, Jonathan. This is an awful crisis in New York and elsewhere, and we need sure and steady leadership. Now, I salute the brave women who came forward with serious allegations of misconduct, of abuse, and there are multiple serious, credible allegations of abuse, so that Governor Cuomo has lost the confidence of his governing partners and of so many New Yorkers. So for the good of the state, he should resign.
There you have it. But as of late Sunday night, he's still our governor, and I don't think he'll resign until right before he gets impeached. We'll see. There are now 19 House Democrats from New York, and 16 of them have called on Governor Cuomo to resign, including my Congressman Mondaire Jones. And I saw this tweet somewhere. The same attitude that emboldens you to target a 25-year-old also emboldens you to scrub a nursing home report. And finally, here is Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He asked her about the same issue.
Finally, I want to ask you about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. A majority of New York's congressional delegation, both senators, have called on Governor Cuomo to resign. You've said there should be zero tolerance for sexual harassment. Right. Does that mean that Governor Cuomo should resign?
I said there's zero tolerance for sexual harassment, and we have taken measures in the House of Representatives, very strong measures in the House under leadership of Congresswoman Jackie Speer of California. What I said at the time that these revelations came forward, I said what these women have said must be treated with respect. They are credible and serious charges. And then I called for a an investigation. I have confidence in the Attorney General of New York. She has called for I think, expeditious investigation. And again, with all the respect in the world for what these women have come forth and said. In terms of, see, you're talking about New Yorkers now. In terms of generally speaking, people have to look inside themselves and say, and Governor Cuomo also, how effective is their leadership in leading the state under the circumstances that are there? But I do think that the women deserve to hear the results of these investigations, as does the governor.
Can he be an effective leader now?
No tolerance. No tolerance. And this is a subject very near and dear to my heart. This is no tolerance for sexual harassment. Let the world know that.
But you're not calling on him to resign right now?
I think we should see the results of the but he may decide, and hopefully this result will be soon. And what I'm saying is the governor should look inside his heart. He loves New York, to see if he can govern effectively.
Well, Nancy Pelosi trying to have it both ways, if you ask me. She really was trying to have it always in that answer. But why not just call for him to resign? I'm not quite sure why she wasn't more forward with that. And I also just wanted to play you this. This is Eric Wemple. He is the Washington Post media critic, and he was on the CNN media critic show with Brian Stelter, reliable sources. And I just thought this was a great moment where he called out the network while he was on the network.
But I would be remiss, Brian, if I didn't mention CNN's own huge media story here with Chris Cuomo, the anchor at the 9 o'clock hour, who covered Andrew Cuomo and had all these wonderful love-a-thon interviews with him, more than 10 of them. And they suspended the conflict of interest rule for Chris Cuomo for those interviews. Yet all of a sudden they've enforced it again now that Andrew Cuomo is in the midst of an historic scandal in the Albany State House. So I think that is a major black eye for CNN.
Oh, wow. Oh, snap. Oh, snap, Eric Wemple. Thought that was pretty good. Okay, now I reached out to my parents when I got back from visiting them over the weekend. And the last time they were on, I shared a video clip with them, and they went viral. And so this time they really wanted to make sure they look good just in case they were a big hit again. In my opinion, they always are. It's always kind of gold, radio gold, comedy gold. And they always give their honest perspective. And actually, that was a really interesting perspective. I wonder how people their age, their generation look, generally speaking, at sexual harassment, because, you know, it was so much worse for women, I think, then. And my mom goes a little easy on Andrew Cuomo and also shares an example of when she was sexually harassed while she was a nursery school teacher by the guy who owned the nursery school, which I thought was really honest and poignant. And then my dad makes a hilarious comment. Anyway, it's great. It's 10 minutes. Here's my conversation with my mom and dad, who are constituents and lifelong New Yorkers. Celebrating 50 years of marriage this year, both newly vaccinated, just came back from visiting them with the girls this weekend. Here it is.
Got my
I can't tell which side of my hair.
You want me to change the sweater, or is it okay?
No, that one looks just ratty enough around the collar. You have such great gear.
Ratty.
No, honestly, you have such great gear and clothes and biking equipment and skiing equipment. Why do you wear those ratty, I've
been working around the house.
We're cleaning out all the closets, the front closet, the laundry room, everything.
Yourself like a nice EMS jacket or sweater like I have, or a nice Patagonia, polo.
Did you take that from my house this weekend?
No, this is mine.
Oh,
I did steal quite a few.
Yours is on the couch, I think.
When I woke up this morning, I put this on.
I did loot your entire home, though. I took quite a few things.
That's good.
Yeah.
You forgot the pickles.
I took 2 jackets, a pair of pants, a hat, goggles, and a baseball signed by like 6 of the 500 home run hitters.
Yeah.
Other than that, I didn't.
That's worth about, what'd you say, $3,000?
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Well, that's why you took it.
So, I just want to ask you guys your thoughts on Governor Andrew Cuomo. I've just played Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, longtime New York Senator, the mayor of New York, he and Andrew Cuomo hate each other for a long time. But you two are longtime New York State residents, and I don't know if you share an opinion on this, but let's go to you first, Mom, so you're not influenced or polluted by Dad. What do you think about Andrew Cuomo? Do you think that he should resign?
Well, because of the nursing home thing, yeah, I think he's definitely guilty. The sexual assault business or harassment, whatever, is bad. As a woman, I say it's bad. I know what it's like. But I wouldn't say that shouldn't make him resign, but definitely the nursing home thing. You know, he's not well liked by a lot of people.
Yeah, nobody really likes him. I don't think his family likes him. You know, you say, I know what that's like. Would you mind telling me that nursing nursery school story?
Oh, just that it was run by a couple, Mr. and Mrs.
You were a teacher at a preschool.
That was my first teaching job, yes. And when it was my break time, I would go into the kitchen to have my lunch, and he would follow me, and he would follow me around and tell me about the dreams he had about me, which were very sexual, very graphic. And finally, one day I said to him, I would hate to have to tell your wife why we're leaving, which wasn't really the reason, but it was a great excuse because we were leaving to go back to New York.
How did he respond there?
He never bothered me again.
But you knew that you were leaving, so you didn't, you know. How long did he do that?
Not too long. Maybe a few times, a couple times.
How does that make you feel to hear that story, Dad?
I have dreams about her, too, so I tell him. Don't seem to bother her at all. I don't know. She was young then, but...
I was young and a lot more sexy.
You know, you got to look at it. I mean, she handled it properly, and she was like, what were you, 20, 21?
21, probably.
Okay, so she's 21 years old, and this lecherous old man comes up, makes a pass at her, and she handled it. Now, these women that Cuomo has been going after, now there's 7 of them. They say, oh, he was terrible to me. He said these different things, and for that, we should impeach him. He's a lecherous old man. What we don't know is how many times did he approach women and they said fine, and it was all sex that they agreed to, no problem, and we don't know that. I mean, he's not coming out and saying that. He's just a dirty, lecherous old man, basically, and he didn't do anything. He just talked to people. He talked dirty.
He did terror. I don't know if you've read the allegations. You haven't read the allegations. If you read the allegations,
he put his hand on a woman's back at a dance and. He touched a woman. He kissed another woman that she didn't expect it. Okay, maybe the guy drinks at a party and he gets a little goofy. I'm not making excuses for him.
Sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
No. I'm just saying.
Sounds like you're a Cuomo apologist. Homologist.
No, I'm saying
politicist.
What he should say is, I'm a lecherous old man. And I just don't know what my boundaries should be, and I should learn that because I am the governor of the New York State. So he's just. Now, switching it over to the people that he killed, that to me is that's bad. And I've been saying that right along since I found out the first time that I found out that he was sending people back to the nursing home who still had some form of COVID-19, whether they were not, they should have been someplace else. Instead, he sent them back to these homes where they mixed with people who were healthy at the time and they died. He killed them. That's bad. Yeah. That's the way I look at it. That's a problem.
I hadn't even gone to you yet. Is that the way you see it, Mom?
I do. At first, I didn't realize that's what he had done. I didn't know that he sent sick people back to the nurse. Well, anyway, I didn't understand all the circumstances.
Now, how informed are the two of you? Have you read many newspaper articles, seen television segments? Do you really know what's going on here?
Well, unless the newspapers are lying, yeah.
But you've read the newspapers on the things.
We weren't there, if that's what you're asking.
Well, thank God. There. Thank God.
No, he didn't approach me, if that's what you mean. No, that didn't. No.
All right.
Brother's a creep too. Can I say that?
What's that?
His brother's a creep too.
Chris on CNN?
Yeah, I think he's a creep.
He's a friend of mine. How dare you?
He's just a little full of himself.
Some of your friends
he's too full of himself.
Yeah.
You think he's full of himself? You don't watch him at 9 o'clock on CNN?
No, I hear him on the radio.
Oh, right, on POTUS. That's right.
He talks about, it's creepy.
All right, so you guys both think he should resign, but you're more concerned about the nursing home scandal than the allegations of sexual harassment that you have almost completely excused, Dad.
I'm not. No, here's what I'm saying. Let me rephrase it. He probably approached 40 women in his time as governor.
He throws it up again. He throws a lot out there. Yeah.
Throws a lot out there. A lot of times he's successful because that's his line. I am the governor. I'd like to go to bed with you. That's his line. Everybody, single guys have a line. That's his line. The problem is he's lecherous. He's an old man, and he goes to 20, 25-year-old women. Jesus. And it's creepy. So, I'm not making excuses for him at all. No, and the guy's a creep.
I do think
who wants to be a creep?
I do think that he handled the COVID epidemic in New York State very well for the most part, except for the nursing home thing.
Except for all the tons of the people that he killed.
Yeah, other than that, he's fine. Yeah, great. I mean, when he went on TV every day, I was there like, this guy's on TV. What is?
Well, it was
the
first state. It was a major outbreak. It made sense, and he handled it well. And I think he brought the nation a certain sense of confidence.
He got a lot of publicity out of it.
Well, especially when he had Trump.
He was loving that TV time.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, he was arguing with Trump a lot.
Yeah,
fighting with Trump. Yeah,
Okay.
And then he wrote a book about how successful he was.
What was your line, Dad? Every guy's got a line, you said, and I started thinking about what mine was. I don't know if I really. I mean, maybe you meant like an angle, but. Did you have a line, Mom? Did he have a line? What works? What's his thing?
He asked me if I wanted to go for a ride with him the first night I met him.
Oh, Jesus.
We were out at a bar.
Worse than Cuomo. Worse than Andrew Cuomo.
I didn't go for a ride with him.
Obviously, I didn't have.
All you had was a car, apparently.
He had his father's car.
Wasn't even my car. I didn't own the
Jesus. Do you want to go for a ride in my dad's car? Is your line?
Yeah.
Well, he had a motorcycle on our next date.
Yeah.
You went on a motorcycle the next date?
Yeah. I didn't own a car. I took what's the extra helmet for? We're on a motorcycle. It's the law. You have to wear a helmet.
Whose motorcycle?
It was mine.
Oh, all right. Well, at least you owned that.
I didn't have a car. I had a motorcycle.
Wow. Well, I'm glad it all worked out. Yes.
Yeah,
it did.
But I don't think I was creepy. Maybe I was, but I don't think I was creepy. Well, I was young then. I was 25, 27, whatever I was.
Sounds fine.
I mean, I don't think I'd approach a girl who's the same age as my granddaughter today, which is what he did. I mean, the guy he's creepy.
Yeah. All right.
Just say I'm a lecherous old man and be done with it. But I did kill people, so maybe that's bad. That's what he should say.
Okay.
I kill people, but I'm a lecherous old man.
Lifelong New Yorkers, chuck them there. I'm thinking about running for New York State governor because I've lived there where you live now, which is upstate New York in a rural area. Then I went to college in a rural area. I lived in Manhattan for 12 years. Now I live in suburban New York City in Rockland, raising our kids here. And, I've lived all over the state. I know the state inside out. And in addition, I don't want to brag, but I've never assaulted anyone.
And you've performed all over.
Sure.
And you've skied all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know New York State.
I've covered this entire state, and I've never assaulted anybody. I've been assaulted. I've let some ladies down.
How did that happen?
Well, one woman, I really let her down. I don't blame her. I still have a lot of respect for her. After we were seeing each other. You actually met her. I brought her home once, the redhead. We went skiing. I forget her name. But we
can't remember her name.
Yeah, I remember her.
Claire, maybe. And we were
Clarissa. It was
Clarissa something. And she saw me bomb or not have a very good set. And the next day she said, "I'm not going to lie to you. I'm less attracted to you after seeing you not have a great set." And
he didn't perform.
Where did you perform?
I don't know where it was. It didn't matter. It was just, I let her down. With a weak performance. I didn't blame her though. I was like, you know what? I don't blame you. You're right. It's tough to see someone fail like that and still want to be with them. Humiliated.
What brought that up? What was it?
Well, that's the girl. That's the only girl I feel like I really let her down. But I mean, that wasn't like all the others
you think were you were successful in.
I didn't assault anybody.
Well, no, you didn't assault, but it sounds like if she's the only girl you ever let down.
I think the ugliest I got with me with a woman, and a woman was where are you going? You're leaving? You're okay.
This was before.
That was you saying that to the woman.
Just her leaving the apartment. That's it. All right. Can I call it? Okay. Bye-bye. Anyway, I'm running.
Bother to close the door.
I am running.
I think
all right. We'll vote for you.
I know where you can get 2 votes.
From you guys?
No, Val and her best friend.
Good night. Love you. Bye.
Good night. Love you too.
Love you too.
And there they go, Chuck and Mary, fully vaccinated, all new and improved. Vaccinated, yeah! Oh, we had such a great weekend. You know, you gotta really stay in the moment. I can't say it enough to myself. I'm talking to myself because when I stayed mindful of that moment, we had such a great time with my mom and dad. I feel so grateful and lucky that they're doing okay today. Hard to see my dad struggling, limping around. He lost vision out of his eye last year, and it's been hard. It's been really hard for him to rebound. He's an excellent skier, and skiing's hard because he's got no strength in his ankles, and it's just been tough. But he got out there with the girls and I, and we had an awesome Saturday, a beautiful sunny Saturday on the slopes. Okay, so now moving on. Let's get to my big guest for today's show. He is an all-time favorite here on this show and every show I've ever been involved with that invited guests from SiriusXM to CNN. He's one of the most prominent anti-racist writers and educators in the United States and has been for over 25 years, where he's spoken over 1,500 college and high school campuses. He's also the author of 9 books, including his latest, Dispatches from the Race War. He appears regularly on CNN and Msnbc to discuss race issues. He graduated from Tulane University in 1990, and he's the host of the podcast Speak Out with Tim Wise. You can find him on Twitter at TimJacobY. Apologize for the minor audio blips that there's some static at one point, but I don't think it's really much of an issue. It was such a great conversation, and I think that was minimal. Just a couple parts of words dropping out. Here now, my conversation with Tim Wise from late last week. Could we just start by reminding people, everybody listening, it's just important, I know you've done this many times, but kind of the difference between I'm not a racist and I'm an anti-racist.
Well, I mean, the most basic level, I'm not a racist, is what people say when they are that. Like, that's normally the thing that people say when they're desperate to avoid confronting not only their own conditioning, but just the larger issues in society, right? I mean, I don't go around saying I'm not a racist, A, because I know that I, like everyone else in this country, have been conditioned to be one, and B, I understand that the key is being anti that thing, right? It's like, you've heard this analogy before. I remember some guy, did a great YouTube video a few years ago on it saying, it's like saying I'm not a rapist. Like, well, okay, but are you against rape? Like, are you challenging rape culture? Are you challenging other guys who clearly don't have your, ecumenical view on the assault of women, for instance? Like, and so that's the thing, right? You can say you're not something. And number one, it very well might not be true and probably won't be in a culture like this. And number two, it's not the point. And so, when people say that, it's typically a way to deflect not only from their own stuff, but just the fact that this problem, racism, is not just this interpersonal, it's not a skeletal condition, in spite of the fact that people say they don't have a racist bone. Like, you remember the song it wasn't like the hip bone connects to the bigot bone. Like, that wasn't the way the song went. Right. And yet people say that as a way to get out of understanding what racism really is, which is a structural and systemic matter of inequality that has personal repercussions, but is fundamentally bigger than your own personal nonsense,
So moving it forward and being more specific, I was just watching a clip of Sharon Osbourne, who is on a talk show, one of these panel shows. It's called like The Talk or something. Doesn't really matter. People probably heard, maybe they've heard about this at this point. Maybe they haven't. But basically using her as an example, she was defending Piers Morgan's right to say whatever he wants about anything, including the royal family, et cetera. We can talk about that as well. But basically what she said is, listen, I'm not a racist. I treat everybody the same. And she went off on the whole diatribe. I treat everybody the same. And I bet you that's true. Or let's say that's true of people, that they generally treat everybody based on, the same qualities, gender, sexual. Right. They don't care. I treat you by your character. I always hear the problem there, Tim, It's not that. The problem isn't how I treat individuals. The problem is how systems treat groups of people. Can you help me elaborate on the?
Well, that's true. That's an important point. But let me also say this. It's not, it is a problem if you say you treat everyone the same for two reasons. Number one, again, the research says that's probably not the case. We do, in fact, make very fine distinctions based on color and culture and linguistics and ethnicity and all these things, starting at a very early age. We recognize difference and we start ascribing meaning to it in a way that actually does cause us to treat certain people better than others. So number one, let's just be humble enough to admit what all of the science tells us, but also more importantly, treating people the same, even if you were doing it, treating people the exact same when they don't face the same stuff and don't have the same experience is not a good thing. And taking it out of the race example, let's think about, disability. Ableism is a real thing, right? Discrimination against people with disabilities, be they visible or invisible. Now, if you say, well, I treat people with disabilities the same way I treat able-bodied people. Well, what does that mean? It means that if you have a workplace that has been created physically with the able-bodied in mind and you're treating them, the disabled, just like able-bodied folks, you're not going to be meeting their needs, right? You're not going to actually be creating a space that is equitable and functional for those folks because those folks are dealing with some stuff these other folks aren't. The same is true with color and gender and religion and all these things. If you say, well, I treat my Jewish employees and my Muslim employees just like my Christian employees. I let them all off for Christmas. Okay. Great. But some folks have got different holidays. So what do you do there? Right. It's just treating different people the same is not treating them equitably. And it's not treating them as the people they are. It's like what we're doing is we have this dictionary definition of an individual and we say we treat everyone like an individual, but we are not dictionary definitions of ourselves. We are encyclopedic interpretations of ourselves, which for, the younger folks will be like, what is that? Us old folks know encyclopedias were these big books that you had behind you on shelves like this that you used to read when you didn't have the internet. An encyclopedia definition of a person is complex, right? It's paragraphs long. A dictionary is just, it's just one or two words or a phrase. And we live complicated lives. As someone who lives a complicated life, I need you to treat me as the person I am, not some abstract interpretation of what a person is, which is what people like Sharon Osbourne are saying, however well intended, when they say that, right? And they're saying, I don't really see you as you. I just see you as this abstract individual whom I can graft, anything I want onto and treat you the way I want to treat you, not the way that you actually need to be treated.
So, but I still feel like when I say, well, I treat everybody similar, even if I believe that, my response to that person would be like, fine. But what we're talking, the problem is systemic. It's institutional. Right. And so what we need you to do is stop thinking about how you treat people, because how often are you even around the type of people that you're saying you have no problems with at work? At home, right. Where are you? Fine. Will you treat them fine?
Well, and that's why, right. And what you're saying connects to what I'm saying. The reason that it's not okay to say I treat everyone the same or similarly is because systems are operating, right, in the background of your experience that are creating disparities and dislocations for the people who you say you treat the same, right? It's because the systems are different. So if you were to say, for instance, well, look, I'm an admissions officer at a college and I treat everyone the same. I'm looking for people with a 1450 or better on the SAT. All right. But what's the problem with that? The problem is we have a K-12 educational system that is creating opportunity for certain people to be more likely to get that score than other people, even when those other people are just as bright. So if you're using one standard and you're overlaying that, even if you're doing it well, even if you're doing it as you say you are, if you overlay that standard on a society of systemic injustice, you will perpetuate injustice.
But you won't know it, and you won't recognize it if you're not really aware of these things. And so that's why the next question, I feel like, maybe you disagree with that, but I feel like the next question I say is, what we have to do is not just be not nice to people who are black and brown when we see them, and not treat people differently at the grocery store aisle. What we have to do is understand history, understand where we're at, and do our best to make sure that we're providing opportunity and also that we are supporting people and policies that change the system. So you can't say, I don't have a racist bone in my body, and then vote for a person who is making it harder for black folks to vote. You can't support that, even if you agree with them on a bunch of other things. If you're supporting people who support policies that minimize opportunity, in this case, access to voting, what's that, Tim?
Right. It's racism. Yeah. I mean, it's very simple. That's the quickest answer you'll ever get out of me. Next question. Right. I mean, we could just move on.
How do we tell people I try so hard to articulate that. I don't think I do a great job, but I'm succinctly, don't support people who are making it harder for others to vote. That is what the whole civil rights movement was about. And we're back there.
Right. Right. I mean, we've got to have a different standard of analysis that says we're going to look at the impacts of our actions as being more important than the intentions of our actions. Intentions may, and look, some people are intending to limit certain folks' ability to vote, but I'm sure there are some, conservatives out there who would say, well, that's not my intent. My intent is, whatever else they want to say it is. But we have to have a standard that's different than just intent. Intent is a fine standard in a criminal trial. You want to have that. And the reason you want to be able to demonstrate intent in a criminal trial is because you're talking about maybe taking someone's freedom. You don't just do that on a lark, right? But when we're talking about assessing sociological injury, like did harm happen? Is this a good or bad thing? We shouldn't be looking at the intent, because the intent of the perpetrator is never, no one ever acknowledges, or rarely, that their intent was to harm people. People are not usually the kind of sociopaths that are like, yep, I intended to make you cry and I hope you had a good one. Like most people are caught up in our notions of goodness. The fact is, though, if the impact of our actions is injurious, and that's only going to be understood by the person who's injured, to whom we ought to be turning, for insight on did it hurt or not. That's the standard. If I'm standing in line with you at Chipotle and I step on your toe as I'm ordering my sofritas bowl or whatever, you're not, and I break your toe, you're not going to care if I woke up that morning and said, I'm gonna break some toes today. Like that's my goal. I'm gonna go toe stomp at the Chipotle. All you're going to know is, damn, that really hurt. And I would really like, an apology. And, if you actually broke my toe and I got to go to the doctor, maybe you ought to pay for it. Like that's the standard of analysis, not just what I intended, but what my actions did to somebody else, or to, in this case, groups of people.
So let's talk about where we're at with what's the standard of analysis on the current state of democracy in America in terms of hundreds of new laws being passed at several different states to make voting harder. And I'm hearing, we just commemorated the 53rd anniversary of Selma, I believe, right? And they have these two bills moving through Congress to try to restore the Voting Rights Act, which was gutted by John Roberts and the Supreme Court during the Obama administration. So where are we with all of these new laws passing as a result, by the way, of a problem, the big lie, a problem that doesn't exist, that didn't occur? They're trying to fix, they say, issues with voting that didn't happen. And so many new laws, Tim, and a grassroots great effort, more than grassroots, I think, effort to fight against them. But where are we in 2021 with all of these new laws being passed?
Well, we're at a place where there's a group of white folks in this country, reactionary white folks, who are very clearly done with democracy. They never really supported it. I mean, first of all, to be reactionary in general, whether it was the old reactionary Southern Democrats who were so adamantly opposed, obviously, to the civil rights struggle and the Voting Rights Act in the first place, or whether it's reactionary Republicans now, the reactionary has never wanted anything approximating democracy because they don't trust the people. They believe the masses are ignorant and that society should be run by the quote unquote better people who are, affluent and white and male and straight and Christian, et cetera. So this is just them doing what they do. Reactionary forces in every society are about maintaining traditional lines of authority and hierarchy, which means you don't want the peasants to vote, right? You don't want them to actually have a say in self-governance. So part of this is eons old. This is not necessarily new. But in this particular context, it is very obvious that what these folks have done, and I talked about this a little bit in my book, Dear White America, back in 2012, that there was going to come a point. I didn't know it would come this quickly, and I didn't know it would involve Donald Trump and all of this nonsense, but there was going to come a point, I said at that time, when white folks were going to realize, or a subset of white folks on the right, were going to realize that they were going to have a very difficult time winning national elections just based on demographic change and cultural change and young people, even young white folks, sort of rejecting a lot of the especially reactionary nonsense that their elders are pumping. So as a result, when they realize that, right, they're going to have a couple of choices. One is to do the, Malcolm X ballot or the bullet moment, right? Like, well, we can't win there. We may have to go this route, which they wouldn't know Malcolm said it. They would have no awareness of that, but anyway, they would have that sort of militia moment, which is sort of what 1-6 was in a way. But the other option, right, is to say, well, damn, if the demographics are changing and the vote's going against us, we can just keep people from voting. We can do, the voting restrictions. We can try to build the wall, keep these brown folks out, right? We can try to alter the demographic change, or at least hold it off for as long as we can, and then make sure that the people who are here don't have a right to vote. And that's what they're doing. They can talk about fraud all they want. There have been 2 proven cases of election fraud in the 2020 cycle. They were both Republicans. And so the idea that there's this massive fraud, not only is it a big lie, it's an overwhelmingly racist lie. These are people who only focus on Philadelphia, Atlanta, Detroit, and Milwaukee, right? They weren't talking about, and in Pennsylvania, to talk about Philly is hilarious because it wasn't even Philadelphia that made the difference. It was the outer ring suburbs, which are overwhelmingly white. They're the ones that flipped from 2016. I mean, the 2020 numbers in Philly and Detroit and Milwaukee and Atlanta look very similar to what they looked like 4 years ago. It's the whiter areas, but Donald Trump didn't want to talk about that. And the right doesn't want to talk about that because they know there's no political capital to be gained from bashing white suburban and exurban voters. The capital is in bashing black and brown folks. So if you can say, we're not going to let you do early voting on Sunday. Why? Is there any evidence in Georgia that Sunday is the day that the black folks go cheat? Right? No, it's just the day that they do souls to the polls. So that's why they're doing it. We're not going to let you hand out water and food. Why? Because if you hand out water and a bag of chips, what is there, some secret thing in the chip bag that allows them to go in and alter the voting? No, it's just a way to make it more miserable for people who are waiting on long lines who, guess what, don't live out near a cornfield. The ones who have long lines live in cities, where all the jobs are created, where all the economic growth comes from. That's where the lines are. And so they don't want those people to vote, and they want to make it as miserable as possible so they'll stay home. This is transparent. It is the biggest assault on democracy that we've seen in my lifetime. And it's important for us to call that out and to recognize that that's what this isn't just, sometimes we say they're against multicultural democracy. It's not just that. They're against democracy itself, very obviously.
It's thinking about people in certain areas not having a hard time voting. Maybe, in more rural areas, you might have to drive a little further, but really not much of a line or so on. I mean, most people just don't, I think most folks don't understand how hard it is to vote in a city, in a really densely populated area, how hard it is to run a polling place, how hard it is to have to go and, there's a lot of people, some hayseeds out in the field, and, their conversation as they're waiting in line, like, did you get broadband yet? That's a different group of people in 2021 than people waiting in line, sometimes in harsh conditions outside, especially with COVID. And so, yeah, they just want to make their lives more difficult by taking away the chairs, literally. No more chairs for people to sit in. I saw this back and forth. I don't know if it was a back and forth because I didn't see him respond, but I wanted to ask his question and have you respond to it. Matt Yglesias is a very well-known progressive writer. He's now at Vox, but he wrote something on Twitter that you responded to. This is a really, I think, interesting point. He writes, I sometimes feel like anti-racists should take racism more seriously as a force in American life. Does emphasizing the idea that a GI Bill for essential workers will benefit non-white households make its adoption more likely or less likely? First of all, what is he saying? Let me
contextualize what he's saying. So a week or two before, he had his intern. So very nice to have an intern, Matt.
I have fake Keith.
Right. Well, he has a real intern for his Substack. Fascinating. Didn't know you could get that. He has an intern who wrote this think piece on his Substack, which basically was making the argument that those of us who talk about race so much are scaring off the white folks. And if we would essentially just focus on the class benefits of this or that legislation, we'd be able to stitch together a bigger coalition. It's the same thing that folks have been saying since Daniel Patrick Moynihan in the 60s, William Julius Wilson in the 80s, Bill Clinton said it in the 90s. I wrote a book about it called Colorblind, which Matt clearly didn't read. And I wrote that in 2010, which demonstrated with lots of footnotes and facts and studies that actually avoiding the conversation around race and just talking about class doesn't work. Not only is it unethical because it hangs black and brown folks out to dry, basically, and says, oh, we'll get to y'all stuff, some other time when we take care of the white working class salt of the earth folks first. But it actually is politically not as effective as it may sound. And I explain why in the book. So that's number one. This particular post, he's upset. And first of all, I don't need Matt Iglesias to be telling anti-racists how to do anti-racism better. Like if you want to be part of that conversation, then you need to have been part of that conversation. And he isn't part of it. And to my knowledge, has never been part of it. So that's like taking advice from a Republican on how to have Democrats win elections. It's like, I don't trust your judgment on that. But more importantly, his advice is flies in the face of all of the most recent research. The best research we have on this, Ian Haney Lopez has done some amazing work on this with some of the race class narrative work that he's doing. Heather McGee's new book, The Sum of Us, talks about the importance of talking about race and class together. Yeah, you don't want to just talk about race, of course, but that's a red herring. That's a straw man argument. No one really does that. What they have made their argument around is saying, listen, we need to be making the argument that racial equity is good for everyone. So if you have legislation that's going to help black and brown folk, here's how it's also going to help white folk, right? You don't run away from that. You don't dispense with that or save that for later. You put that up front. And you do in Ian Haney Lopez's race class narrative work, what they're finding is the argument you ought to be making is, hey, these right wingers are manipulating your racial fears. They are taking the fears that they hope you will have and trying to scare you as a way to distract you from the fact that they're not doing anything for you. That's a very aggressive approach because that approach says, listen, you may have some of these biases, and the problem is they know it, and they're going to try to manipulate you. That's actually a very effective approach. But essentially, Iglesias seems to be saying, and maybe it's not, and I even said that in one of the parts of the thread, I'm like, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but it comes off like Bernie Sanders kind of, let's just talk about class and the billionaires and the millionaires, and that'll be all we have to do. And if we just talk about these rich people, then all the white working class people will fall in line. And what the research says is, no, they won't. The reason that these white folks who are attracted to race politics are attracted to them and not to universal programs of uplift is the universal part. They actually don't want black and brown folks to benefit from those things. They don't want black and brown folks to have health care. They don't think they deserve it. They don't want them to have good schools. They don't think they've earned them. They don't think they deserve it. So we've got to understand you can't sidestep race, and it's offensive for someone who himself doesn't normally ever talk about these issues to suddenly rescue your anti-racism movement from yourselves. Like, it's offensive, not to me, I don't give a damn personally, but black and brown folks who have been on this beat for, 400 years before Matt Iglesias had an opinion on it, probably we ought to listen to them.
And maybe you should be careful about publishing your intern's thoughts on your Substack as well. That must have created
you probably should.
Did he ever respond on that Twitter thread?
I don't know. I didn't see it. I didn't see a response. That's a shame. I had some reactions. They were all from other people, most of them favorable. I don't know. I mean, but to be honest, I also don't check because I don't really find that Twitter debates are all that useful most of the time. So I don't even bother.
I think that they are useful when it's someone like you and him. And doing it in a even somewhat respectful way, because I would look for that. And I didn't see him respond, and it's just it was disappointing to say the least. Let me ask you to take a look at, you've been tweeting a lot about, paying obviously close attention to the aftermath of 1/6 of the insurrection on the Capitol. And I think that some of your commentary about this certainly could fall in the category of this being a case study in the way that criminal justice system treats people of certain class and race differently than others, because there's so many people being arrested, being caught. And we can talk about how they're found. We can talk about what their life has been like, what kind of access they have to resources to hire a good lawyer, or whether they can't. And the difference with, all kinds of different crimes, misdemeanors committed by minorities who have less resources often. So where do we go? What do you think is the most important points or set of points to talk about the difference in the way these folks are being treated, generally speaking? There's
a lot of examples. Yeah, there's a lot of examples of it. I mean, look, this kid in Georgia, I say kid, this young man, this young adult, 18, I guess, the youngest person so far charged, and he's being released now to the recognizance of his parents who, by the way, drove him to D.C., knowing what he was planning on doing. He'd been posting semi-violent things on his social media. It was very obvious. They took him up there. But now he's been released to them. And the reason, at first, the judge said no, they weren't going to do it. And he actually said it's because, your parents are sort of implicated in this thing. But then this kid got, I guess, smacked in the face in jail. They're like, ooh, it's too dangerous for him. We're going to let him go home. Well, I mean, that's nice. So you get punched in the face in jail, and that's when you get to go home. Oh, I guess Khalif Browder should have thought of that. Oh, but, as a black man on Rikers, that probably wouldn't have made the difference. Now Khalif Browder is dead because of the experience he had in jail, which so destroyed him. Right. And so this kid gets to go home. What is that? I'm not saying that I'm glad he got hit in jail. I don't think we ought to tolerate, violence, whether it's physical or sexual violence in prison and jail. We do that, by the way, because law enforcement uses that as a way to control inmates. So we ought to learn something, right? I happen to believe in replacing the cash bail system and making it easier for people to be out awaiting trial. But I just find it fascinating that we do that for these people. We let that Jenny Cudd from Midland, Texas, whose name could not be more perfect, right? We let Jenny Cudd go to Mexico for a bonding trip with her employees who, if there's any justice in the world, she ain't going to have in about 6 months because she's going down in 15 or 20 years. Her employees are going to have to find another manager. But they went to Mexico, to Cabo or some bullshit, just so she could have a little retreat. And now she's out there demanding she wants to move. Her lawyer filed paperwork that said, we want to move the trial to West Texas because D.C.'s too politically correct and too anti-Trump. So we just want to pick our jury from the yahoos that live out here with Jenny Cudd and voted for Trump, rather than this where we committed our crime. If that is allowed by the judge, then this whole thing has gone off the rails, and people need to be in the streets about that, because that would be an even more egregious example. We don't make those kinds of concessions for black and brown defendants. We don't make hardly any of these concessions. And some of the lessons we're learning about how to treat people humanely and release them, that fine. We ought to be doing that in a lot of cases. But the fact that we're only doing it here, the fact that they lost, Kyle Rittenhouse, hell, they lost track of him for how long? I don't know. Did they ever find him? I guess they found him. But, he gave a phony address when he was out on his own recognizance, and they went looking for him. And I don't know, it was like a vacant lot or something, or some house that he didn't live in. And have they added to his charges? I mean, all I heard about was they lost track of him. They didn't know where he was. Now I heard they're going to have a trial in November. Is he being upcharged? I mean, is his mom being charged? Like he committed fraud, and everybody's just like, well, whatever.
He's a cause celeb. It's on.
Yeah, of course. People are raising money for him on social platforms, and wearing shirts. Kyle did nothing wrong. This is just.
I was very disappointed to see, and I knew he was a pretty conservative guy, but I was disappointed to see Ricky Schroeder be the hero there. I loved Silver Spoons. It was a great show. I wanted a train track in my house. I aspired to have one. Never made it. Never got there. So let's just take a look, though, at the comparison that so many people are still making about how, over the summer we saw Black Lives Matter protesters getting in fights with police, or police getting in fights with them. And how is that different than what we saw on 1/6 and so on? We keep hearing those arguments and comparisons, and then
but it's not what we saw. It's not what we saw.
Right. But then just one more thing I want you to address, which is the way that we look at the police officers. So a police officer was actually killed. Others were just brutalized. And a point a lot of folks are making is now Republicans, all of a sudden, they don't support the blue. They don't support the police all the time. And I think there's some nuance there. And I think the nuance is, well, who are the police policing when we support them and we don't support them? The protests weren't about the environment. They weren't about animal cruelty. The protests over the summer were about, in many ways, the way black folks have always been treated by law enforcement, by the criminal justice system. It's a big whole thing, the movement. And so the cops, they were protesting them, and it's also their job to keep order. It's somewhat complex, but not that complex, Tim.
Right. That's the issue. The whole idea that these people support the police, that is only contingent on when the police are doing the thing for which that institution was created. And let's just be honest. The institution of law enforcement in this country was created for the purpose of controlling black and brown bodies and later poor and working class white bodies as well, to protect the haves from the have-nots, whether that was racial, economic, or a combination of the two. When they perform that function, when they control those who were supposed to be controlled, these folks love them. And when those who were supposed to be controlled challenge them, they expect them. But when the cops are asked to actually control the people who they were supposed to be protecting, that's when they get upset. Listen, what we saw over the summer was repeatedly, there are 600 plus, the last time I checked, and it's been months since I checked, 600 plus videos, which have been made of, they're all over Twitter. I can't remember the guy that did this, but he's got a whole Google spreadsheet of cases where you see police initiating the violence this summer. They weren't being brutalized by BLM protesters. They weren't being brutalized by Antifa. They weren't being brutalized by people at all. They were wading in to groups of nonviolent protesters, kettling them in very tight spaces, beating them with batons, stomping them with horses, pushing them to the ground, knocking them down repeatedly. They were the ones initiating the violence. And yet we are led to believe that somehow there's a comparison between 1-6, where those insurrectionists initiated all the violence against the cops, every last bit of it. And you can hardly find any footage at all from the summer where any BLM activist is initiating any violence against law enforcement, and even the physical aggression against property, which is not actually the same as violence. I mean, when we think about violent crime, the FBI has a definition of that, and property destruction does not qualify. That's considered separate. Even that quote unquote violence was disproportionately being initiated by people that were hangers on. These were not activists in the movement. You have video of a bunch of white kids with skateboards who came into the Twin Cities from some exurb that they live in where nothing ever happens. And they thought to themselves, well, let's go break up windows at the AutoZone. And there's a black woman on a megaphone saying, will y'all please stop? They're going to blame us for this. And they're like, screw it, anarchy, and it has nothing to do with the movement. They're not Antifa. They're not BLM. In Santa Monica, you had a case like this where peaceful protesters gathered, and they're marching on a main drag there in Santa Monica. And every member of the Santa Monica police basically is sent to corral them and to keep eyes on them. And like 4 blocks away, a bunch of ne'er-do-wells who have nothing to do with the movement at all decide they're going to smash and grab some stuff, from a Gap or something, or a Eddie Bauer store, if that's still a thing. I'm dating myself, clearly. You know what I mean? But like they're going to
American Eagle.
American Eagle, whatever, they're going to smash and grab and take some stuff. But the only reason they did that, number one, they weren't connected to the protest. And the only reason they did that was because the cops were all trying to control legal, nonviolent protesters instead of doing their job, which was to protect the property. So whose fault is that?
You also just mentioned something there I wasn't thinking of talking with you about, but I think it's super important. I mean, the kind of history of surveillance by the FBI and local law enforcement on the left. Most recently, I look at NYPD, Joint Terrorism Task Force, or the Homeland Security in general, the federal government, watching Muslims all over America. And every once in a while, they find some guy who's flirting, or they'll almost make a terrorist by giving, hey, come over here and take these weapons. And then here's a cell phone to detonate them. And of course, they're dummy weapons and they put them in jail. But it's very rare. But they have always been listening to folks on the left. Radicals, you know, my brother, he's always been involved with all these kind of radical left politics and always been known that they've been being watched in many ways. Lots of proof of it. It's not some conspiracy. But then you look at the Muslim issue that I mentioned. So my point is, all these types of people that are white, domestic, anti-government supremacists that we've seen for years, from Timothy McVeigh to all these different militias that are existing, how about the resources of the federal government, local law enforcement, watching them a little bit more? Do you think
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure your brother would probably agree with me. I've known your brother for years and knew him before I knew you. In fact, I'm sure he would agree, and you probably would as well, that there's a danger, right, in giving law enforcement the license to go after these reactionary terrorists, because we do know that the history is that it's usually turned against nonviolent, progressive folks who are trying to create real social change for multicultural democracy. So there's always that fear, and that's a legitimate fear. Having said that, that doesn't mean, however, that we shouldn't aggressively deal with the criminal behavior of these right-wing folks, because by that logic, we shouldn't have any laws at all, because they're all going to be abused on behalf of white supremacy, right? We shouldn't have laws against theft because we know that's going to disproportionately be used against black people. We shouldn't have laws against any crime at all because it's going to be disproportionately used against the poor. No one is saying that. We do want to make sure, however, that in order to guarantee that the state doesn't disproportionately use those powers against black and brown folk, against working class and poor folk, and against nonviolent, peaceful civil rights protesters, we want to make sure to change the narrative about what terrorism looks like. And that's the problem, right? The reason that happens is because we've been operating under a sort of definitional umbrella and a linguistic umbrella that says terrorism is what those people do. And as long as that's the way in which people interpret it, they will turn a blind eye to the state using it in the traditional way. If, on the other hand, we are making it clear that actually the terrorism problem in this country is overwhelmingly white supremacist, xenophobic, sexist, and misogynistic, the incel movement people, all of that, like that's actually what terrorism looks like disproportionately. If we have a broader, more capacious definition, then we can ensure that it's used in a much more deliberative and hopefully focused way. Having said that, I'm also, some people have been upset about the fact that so much of the identification of the 1-6 insurrectionist has been left to like online sleuths as opposed to the FBI. Yeah. I'm sort of glad that the online sleuths are on it, because what that tells me is, there's part of me, that would rather have individuals in nonprofits and other contingents identifying people rather than having the state do it. Obviously, the state's going to have to prosecute, but I'm sort of glad, because that tells me they're maybe not snoops as much as they were 50 years ago or 30 years ago, and I'd rather them not be, but I want to make sure that individuals are on it and that we're identifying folks so that we can then, give that information to the proper authorities.
Yes, I do agree with you, and the interests of the state and the government and the overreach and all of that. But I mean, to me, it still seems to be we have to have a conversation about how we resource based on where the threats are, and we can have all kinds of metaphors, from being a homeowner and worried about, different things that are going to affect your home environmentally, to any kind of other, actual physical threats, and what you're concerned with, what your kids. I mean, we don't wrap our kids up in bubble wrap, literally, because we're not really concerned about certain things. I'm not doing a very good job explaining it, but I'm talking about the resourcing where the main threats are. And,
and that's something that cops always advocate when it comes to just regular old street crime, right? Yeah. That's the argument they always say, listen, we gotta have data driven policing. So they have CompStat and all these computer programs that say, here's where the crime's happening, So that's why we have to deploy all these people. Well, putting aside how problematic that can be in terms of over policing and treating everyone in the area like they're potentially a criminal, if that argument is going to be even remotely rational, that we want to make sure we're protecting people over here because that's where the crime is, then you got to apply the same logic when you're talking about something like terrorism, right? And so if the data from the DHS and from every private sector researcher says that somewhere between 70 and like 90% of the terrorist activity in the last, 7 or 8 or 10 years, whatever it is, has been committed by these reactionary either white supremacist or anti-government militia types or whatever, then that's where you need to place the resources. So if you're going to use that logic over here, to deal with, broken windows policing kind of nonsense ever, then you got to use it over here. If you don't want to use it over here, then don't use it in black neighborhoods and brown neighborhoods either. Let's at least have some consistency, right?
I mean, really, if we're just talking about the threat of terrorism, we're not talking about theft, we're not talking about even murder. Right. We're talking about just terrorism.
Right. And it's a bigger problem. Right. I mean, and we're really talking about, and I'm glad you pointed that out, is a kind of criminal activity which is worse than theft and robbery and assault, because it's the kind of criminal activity that threatens to literally destroy the society as a whole. Like, it literally is aimed at destroying functional democracy. It is aimed at terrorizing an entire population. If someone, knocks me over the head when I'm out for a run or something, that's terrible, and that person should certainly be held accountable. But that is not a crime aimed at the heart of the larger society. That's some asshole that just decided to knock me over the head, right? But if you're committing terrorism, if you're trying to overturn an election, if you're trying to terrorize lawmakers, you are literally saying we are attempting to bring this system down for the sake of an authoritarian and fascist kind of government. That has to be seen as a bigger problem than somebody slinging weed on the corner. That has to be seen as a bigger problem than somebody, who's stealing your purse or breaking into, your car and stealing something out of the glove box. It has to be considered more important and really worse than just about any of the criminal activity that we have cops trying to police on a daily basis, because it's broader even than sort of the homicides that take place. 15,000 homicides a year. The vast majority of them are crimes of passion. They're not premeditated serial killing. They're still awful, and the killers need to be held accountable. But even that is a crime that is, I'm mad at you, I'm having a fight, and I kill you. That's terrible. But 1,000 people storming the Capitol trying to overthrow democracy has to rank a little higher on our list of priorities.
Let me try to put it even more pointedly. And by the way, what does it say about me that you said slinging weed in the corner, and then for the next 20 seconds, I was like, where? Who's got it?
Right.
Got a problem.
Which corner? Right.
I got a problem.
Right.
But no, more specifically, I just want to put just a real fine point on that. After 9/11, we spent trillions of dollars invading, occupying a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. Trillions of dollars. What I'm saying is, after 1/6, after the history of this country, really, after Timothy McVeigh, after abortion bombings, any of this, we should allocate at least a larger, I don't even know how to think about proportions in terms of trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan as a result of 9/11 versus what are we spending? How are we addressing the poison in our own country? How are we looking? I actually, Merrick Garland seems to understand the threat because he was the lead prosecutor on Timothy McVeigh, and he made an impassioned, point as an answer to Cory Booker about his own family being Jewish. But I'm just saying that we need to resource this threat proportionally compared to the way that we did the foreign terrorist threat.
Right. And we have to resource it not just on the back end with the law enforcement piece, which obviously only works, sort of as a reaction to terrorism. Right. We also have to be resourcing it with, de-radicalization. We got to be spending money on preventing people from being radicalized by the far right. We need to be spending money on curriculum for schools that we can help, school districts roll out where they can reach middle school kids who are being recruited into some of these networks. This 18-year-old that I talked about earlier being released to his parents from Georgia. I mean, this kid, has been radicalized, I would imagine, for a couple of years. Kyle Rittenhouse is just 17 or whatever, same thing. You have these white supremacist groups who have openly said that they're trying to get kids as young as grade school, as young as elementary school, with ironic memes, and all this other nonsense. And so we've got to be doing some preventive stuff as well. We can't just put all the money, in the hands of law enforcement, A, because I don't trust law enforcement to do this correctly, let alone on their own. But B, if you're not heading it off on the front end, then you're still going to have lots of people dying and lots of destruction that maybe you'll get to prosecute for. But is that enough? No, you want to stop it from happening in the first place.
I know, but it seems like I want to puke thinking about the challenge that is, because radicalizing Muslims took you having to find some dark web video of bin Laden or Anwar al-Awlaki telling you, radicalizing you. And it's easy to radicalize someone in the basement with an internet connection, any of those people, but at least they have to find these kind of real radicals that a corporate media, like They'd be like having, bin Laden having a show at 8 p.m. on a cable news network. That's what you have.
He does, basically.
Well,
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how do you de-radicalize when every night it's at 8, 9, and 10 on Fox or even worse on other ubiquitous networks that are available everywhere? These are huge platforms, and they're radicalizing people nightly. And we've heard this for years. Well-meaning white people going, I lost my dad. He's gone to Bill O'Reilly. I can't even talk to him anymore. That's the radicalization that we've been seeing, and it's mainstream. So I don't know what we do about that. But before, I know we're way over. Do you have any time left to talk about the royal family? I left it for the end anyway.
I mean, we can do a couple of minutes on it. I haven't really thought a whole lot about it. I watched the interview with Meghan.
That's the point. I guess the point is you haven't thought that much about it. It's why I left it for the end and didn't want to go deeply into it. Because my reaction was a yawn that the royal family is racist is not jaw-dropping. And then I started thinking, well, I wouldn't, I'm saying this only to you so you can push back on it, but I pushed back on it on my own. Well, she should have known the family she was marrying into. And I was like, hold on a second. We all marry into families whose parents or in-laws disagree ideologically with a number of things. And Harry, by all accounts, seems like a really good guy who was born into a crazy situation, lost his mom when he was 10. And so those are some of the thoughts. And then also we could talk about Oprah. But what is just what is the most important point, if any, that you can make out of this controversy?
God, I don't know. I guess for me, I would say that I find it interesting how quickly white folks are to dismiss what Meghan Markle is saying, and then to try to make it like, well, but it's not about race, when they are in fact seeking in many cases to try to defend the royals. I wouldn't say that the royals are any more racist than any other, white folks of the European tradition, who come from a colonial nation that had for a long time a colonial empire that was about ruling over black and brown folks. I'm not saying they're any worse, but this idea that somehow they're above that seems absurd to me. I don't think it should be, particularly earth shattering. I think it should sort of be, well, of course, and we should understand that the pain that causes, both psychologically and physically, not just to her and to other black folks for whom that sounds all too familiar, but even to this white man to whom she's married, who seems to be trying to learn some stuff about some stuff that he acknowledges he didn't really understand before. I mean, the one thing that I found, that he said that was so heartening, he sort of went into that. He clearly is out of his depth when it comes to thinking about race. And of course he would be, right? Because he's been raised in the ultimate bubble. I mean, white folks generally were sort of raised in a bubble around race. He's raised in an even more significant bubble. But the fact that he's trying to get it, and the fact that he understands in this moment that it isn't just about standing for and with his wife and children, child and child to be, but also standing in this broader sense as a white person who says, you know what, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm not going to tolerate this. That's a really important lesson in what solidarity ought to look like. And we ought to be able to do that. This is the challenge. Can we do that, though, when it's not a spouse or a close friend or somebody we know? Will we be as strong to stand up and to demand better of our family and other white folk when it's not directed at somebody that we know and love? And that's, I guess, the open question that we don't have the answer.
Great question, and a great place to end. Tim Wise, always excellent. Thank you so much. Sorry for the minor technical difficulties.
It was on my end. I lost internet connection. It wasn't you, so we're good.
Oh, good. I can blame you, and I don't have to blame my fake assistant. Go eat your cheese, Keith.
All right. Take care, buddy.
Tim Wise, everyone. The always great Tim Wise. On Twitter at Tim Jacob Wise. Check him out at speakoutnow.org. Speakoutnow.org, and support Tim. Get his newest books. Get all of Tim's books. And support him on Patreon, too. Patreon.com/speakout with Tim Wise. All right, that is it for today. I'm sorry I didn't have two guests. I try to get two guests pretty much every day, but I went away for the weekend and really took pretty much Friday all the way off when I would have taped segments. But I loved that conversation with Tim, and it was great to catch up with Mom and Dad earlier. I'm looking forward to catching up with you if you are a subscriber to Stand Up, especially if not, what are you waiting for? Huh? Sign up now, patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or go to the paid subscription link in today or every day's show notes. Tell your friends. Give this podcast a 5-star review on Apple. If you haven't figured out how to do that, I'll freaking call you up. Just message me and I will call you and tell you you just send me your phone and I'll do the review. And don't send your phone back. All right, that's it. Take it away, John Carroll. I'll talk to you tomorrow, folks.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, 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 come on. Stand up.
And apparently my old friend Bill Burr made a comment or a joke at the Grammys that I didn't know were happening on Sunday night, something about feminists, and it was fine and funny. And as a feminist, I don't mind being made fun of if I am a feminist, if a man can be one. I thought it was fine. It was harmless. It was no big deal. But it reminded me of one of my favorite conversations of recent times. I wanted to share that for you show enders that stick around. A little treat. Here is Bill Maher trying to get my old friend Bill Burr to say what he thought about the whole cancel culture war bullshit. And I just love what Bill had to say.
And you know, I've always enjoyed you. I think you're a great comic. But I thought tonight maybe we would like sort of share a cry together, because I think we have something in common, which is that we think political correctness may be ruining comedy, or at least threatening it. Because I know you've had your problems with that. And you did a routine recently about how women like it rough. And then, of course, the internet police got all over you.
Well, I gotta be honest with you, I didn't notice if that happened, because I don't pay attention to it. I don't read comments.
Happened. Yeah, they hated you.
Yeah, but who did?
The haters.
This is my thing. Who? Like 20 people? Like 20 people with a hashtag can get like a news story going now. And I just don't think, there's no problem. Like the amount of times somebody tells a joke and they'll say that there's a controversy at a comedy club. That's funny is they'll show the clip on the news and like you hear the crowd laughing. So the comic is basically guilty of telling a joke that worked.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then if you put it on the news, yeah, it's going to be a completely different context. But I mean, I don't go on stage and worry about what people are thinking. Right. It's a really weird time where people are just bringing this up all the time like this is a major problem. I'm not experiencing it. I think it's like a half a dozen stories, and like usual, they're trying to act like, you know, the sky is falling. It isn't. It's a fun time. Come out to a comedy club. You know, you'll have a good time. It's all jokes.
Right. And to undergo, I mean, Chris Rock says he won't play colleges anymore because they're too politically correct.
You just ignore them. It's like 3 days. They flip out for 3 days. They try to bully you into an apology.
Well, you can't ignore them when they're right in the audience and you're playing to them.
You tell them to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, believe me.
It's a comedy show. That's all you do. It's like,
sweetheart, I do it here every week.
It's
you don't have to tell me.
Manufactured strategic outrage.
Right. Then forget it. Let's not have a good cry together. But as long
as what you wanted out of this?
As long as we're on.
I've been singing the same tune for a long time. Well done, Bill Burr. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.